Welcome into Warchant TV as we're starting to break down the 2020 Florida State football season, looking at the opponents for the season ahead, assuming it happens. We're all hopeful that it's going to happen. And up first is Keenan Cummings, who's the managing editor of WVSports.com, which is the West Virginia site on the Rivals Network. And we appreciate him coming in and kind of giving us a little breakdown, a little look ahead to what West Virginia and the Mountaineers have as they prepare to face Florida State in Atlanta in the kickoff game. Assuming it happens. This is all tentative right now. But thanks for joining us, Keenan. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be here and excited to really dive in and talk some football. It seems, we've talked a lot about things that involve football and things that surround football, but not really football itself.
Yeah, we're same here. We're getting ready. Well, I wanted to, just talk about the Mountaineers program. Neal Brown is in his second season as head coach. How did I know the record probably wasn't what West Virginia fans were hoping for, but it seems like, anytime you have a transition, sometimes you have to take a step backwards to take two steps forward. How do people feel about what they saw in the first year, and what are kind of the feelings going into year two?
The good news for West Virginia, 5-7 record is not really what anybody wanted, but Dana really did leave the cupboard bare. I mean, in a lot of spots. They had a very senior-laden team in 2018. They lost some guys in the NFL draft, and they had to replace a lot. And then you have the new coaching staff coming in, new system. But it's not always how you start; it's how you finish. And this West Virginia team won 2 of 3 down the stretch. They gave people some optimism, especially winning 2 on the road. They went to Kansas State and won a football game, and then they went to TCU and won a football game, and almost had Oklahoma State at home. So they were just narrowly missing out on a 3-for-3 to end the season. Could have gotten a bowl game. But 5-7, people were pleased, I guess, is the best way I could put it, because of the transition and what West Virginia had lost. This year, it's hard to say. They're still a very, very young team. It's one of the youngest teams in college football last year. A lot of freshmen were playing, a lot of guys that really hadn't had a lot of experience. They kind of got thrown into the fire and learned it as the season went along. So right now, there's still a lot of questions with this team, a lot of things that need answered, between now and whenever the football season does start. Hopefully it does start in Atlanta. But I do think that there is optimism moving forward for what Neal Brown is building with the program, especially with some of his recruiting success so far.
So what, obviously, everybody knows what kind of Coach Holgorsen was doing offensively. What does Neal Brown want to do offensively? We know he's he's got a great track record as a coach in previous spots as an offensive coordinator. What is the offense supposed to look like when he's got his players and his system implemented, and how close do you think they'll be to that this season?
It's not all that much different from what Dana did. I do think he has more read option, but Dana kind of did that at times too, depending on his personnel. Some RPO stuff, that kind of deal. But it's your classic, air raid type offense. He wants to run the football, which was the biggest bugaboo. I'm sure we'll get to that later about concerns, but West Virginia could not run the football last year. Absolutely abysmal. But, they want to run the football, get the ball to the receivers. They use their guys on the edge, to get them the football. They throw it down the field, use the boundary a lot. So I think that, it's just your classic air raid offense. How close are they? That's a good question. I don't think they're terribly far away, but they've got to be able to have a consistent run game. That was the biggest thing that West Virginia could not establish last year. They had 7 games last year where they rushed for 51 yards or fewer.
Wow. For Florida State fans who have been unhappy with their offensive line for quite a while, that's even there, I think, would be surprised by those numbers. How much of it is the offensive line and how much of it is talent in the backfield?
It's a combination of it all. Last year West Virginia really struggled, especially in the interior offensive line. They were good with pass blocking. That was one area they actually did pretty well with, but they played a lot of young guys because they literally didn't have anybody else. One of their best guys got hurt early in the year, missed the whole year, actually ended up transferring to Oklahoma State of all places. But they had young guys playing that weren't ready to do it. They tried to do a lot of different things in the run game, and it just didn't work. So this offseason, that's been one of the biggest focuses, getting those guys stronger, trying to address that position, and simplifying things so they can run the football. But it wasn't just the offensive line. The backs missed holes at times. The wide receivers didn't block. Tight ends were young and struggled. So there were a lot of elements that went into that. But if you ask Neal Brown, and he's made this clear, so I'm not going out on a limb here, their number one focus, heading into this season, they have to improve running the football, because anybody that knows college football, it's very hard to win football games when you can't control the line of scrimmage.
So will they go into preseason camp trying to figure out the quarterback, do people have their eye on somebody in particular?
That's an interesting question. It depends on who you ask. Neal Brown wants to make this a competition. I mentioned closing the season strong last year. That wasn't with the starter. Austin Kendall, Oklahoma graduate transfer, started the first 9 games for West Virginia, and it was up and down play. It wasn't all his fault. A lot of drops, a lot of other things went into involved. Couldn't run the ball. There's a lot of things that went into play. The defense got better as the season went along as well. But Jarrett Dagey, transfer from Bowling Green, brother of Seth, who actually throttled West Virginia in 2012 in a bowl game or at a game down in Lubbock, he took over. And you know how fans are. They all that matters is the W. They win 2 games, 2 of those 3 games. He plays well. He doesn't play incredibly well, but well enough to win, make some phenomenal plays in some of those games where he kept it alive and was able to throw it on the field. So you asked Neal Brown, he just addressed this yesterday, actually. It's still a competition. If you ask a lot of fans right now, this is decided. They're completely behind Dagey. But in Austin Kendall's defense, he did hurt his hand earlier in the year and had to get some stitches. It kept opening, and it really affected how he was able to throw the ball at times. So I think that they want to make it as open as possible, but you know how fans are. Fans have already made up their mind for the most part.
And what does Dagey do well?
He's not a runner. I would say if you put him in a straight line, Kendall's going to beat him in a foot race. He had more rushing yards than him last year, but what he does extremely well is he keeps his eyes downfield and he can move the pocket. And he made a play against Kansas State last year that was just phenomenal. Same thing against TCU. Just extending the pocket and getting the ball down the field. He gets the ball out quick. He's your prototypical air raid quarterback. Gets the ball out quick, accurate. Is able to get it to his playmakers in space, and really kind of has that moxie. I know that's kind of a quote unquote term, but he just seems like he has it. The players really rallied around him late in the year because West Virginia was a football team before that Kansas State game. They really didn't have a lot to play for. Maybe a bowl game if you got hot, which they almost did. But at that point, didn't really have a lot to play for. And they go on the road and beat a Wildcats team that was really, really desperate for a win.
And then switching to the other side of the ball, defensively, what kind of, I guess, how did things go for them in that area last year? And how many guys are they bringing back?
Quite a few. That is an area that surprised a lot of people. They lost some guys. They lost David Long, who was just an absolute beast at linebacker. They lost some other guys that were centerpieces of that 2018 defense, and a whole new scheme, asking them to do a lot of different things. And that was probably the strength of this football team down the stretch. I've talked a lot about the offense and the quarterback, but really the defense played exceptional. They kept them in a lot of games, had put them in chances to win games. Darius Still is a homegrown boy from Fairmont, about 15 minutes down the road, really took off. He became he's probably one of the top 5 interior defensive linemen in college football and really not a lot of people probably know about him. He had 7 sacks last year from that nose tackle position and really kind of took over. And they return a lot of guys. Now, they didn't lose a ton of guys. You're always going to have attrition from year to year, but they got some guys back, and I think there's some optimism, depending on what happens with this deal with Vic Koenig and everything. Hopefully that works itself out. But that you got to feel good about what they got coming back. And then they've also kind of went out and got some transfers that could potentially play immediately this fall, although some of that's still up in the air as well.
What are they built more to stop other spread type offenses, or is it more of a traditional defensive attack?
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of built spread, but I mean they've played well against teams that do power eye, that kind of thing as well. Because the misnomer about the Big 12 anymore is it's what people thought about back in 2012, and a lot of those teams, Baylor, Kansas State. They're running pro style offenses now.
Gotcha. In terms of, leadership, seniors, I mean, is this a team that there's a few guys who are kind of leading the team, or are they looking for leaders to emerge?
I think it's a mix of both. They have some guys returning. I mentioned Darius Stills. You got the quarterbacks who've really kind of taken the bull by the horns. It's interesting that they're battling for the job, and Neal Brown does this thing called an accountability team. He takes the entire offseason all the way up to the start of fall camp, and he competes. He puts all the players into teams, and they go against each other. The number 1 and number 2, and they've been trading places, are the 2 quarterbacks. So those guys have been leaders. Stills has been a leader. Some other guys in the secondary that really stepped up last year have been leaders. So they've got some guys, but they're still a young team. This is a team that's got to kind of find itself in a sense. When I looked at this team, when Neal Brown took over, I always thought year 3 would be when they could really challenge. But we all know college football is a fickle girl. You can get good one year and let it roll, or you can have a flash in the pan year. So I do think that there's optimism for West Virginia, especially moving forward. But this team could surprise some people. I do think bowl eligibility is well within sight.
What's the talk about Florida State? Obviously, Florida State's had 2 or 3 down years compared to three down years compared to what they normally are. But what are fans looking forward to? Is it a game that's got people excited more so than a typical non-conference game?
Oh, absolutely. I think anytime you get to go against a team the caliber of Florida State, it's exciting. This is a good matchup for West Virginia. I think both fan bases are probably going to bring a lot of people there. West Virginia had a good showing when they went down there and played Alabama a few years ago. So I think that fans are excited. It's Florida State. They want to get a win. You mentioned they played a few times. They've lost to them the last couple times. Some of them have been close. They'd like to get a win. And obviously West Virginia went through a coaching change last year. Florida State's doing it this year. You never know how that's going to adjust. Florida State's obviously had a lot of guys coming in and out as well. So I think it's an interesting matchup. It's one of those week 1 matchups that people aren't really going to talk about that much, but could be some really exciting football because there's so many unknowns.
If the stadium could be capacity, which it's obviously probably not going to be, we don't know how many fans are going to be able to be there. But if there weren't limitations on how many fans could be there, how much fan support do you think would have come down for that game?
Quite a bit. West Virginia travels very well. I mean, if you've been to some of those bowl games, you know that. I mean, they travel well. I kind of compare them to Virginia Tech. One of those schools that people don't really talk about as much, but always put a lot of butts in the stands. So I do believe a lot of people would come to that. Now with this, I mean, who knows? Who knows if people are even going to be allowed to attend? So it's going to be weird. I don't want to go down that alley before we have to, but college football is just such a game that is just built around the fans, and it'd be really odd if it's an empty stadium.
I agree 100%. Well, listen, man, I appreciate it. We'll have some of your comments up on our site at warchant.com, and we'll also be helping you guys do a preview for your site as well. I hope people enjoy it, and we're looking forward to the season. It's not that far away, and just keep our fingers crossed that it happens. And thanks a lot, Keenan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, man. Anything you need.
Take care.